the favor of God. The Kobil dictionary says, if you regard something or someone with favor, you like or support them. The Webster dictionary defines favor as goodwill or kind regard. It also defines favor as the state of being approved. In our study today, the main Hebrew word translated favor is chen, C-H-E-N, and it also means grace. And the main Greek word for the New Testament translated favor is charis, and it also means grace. We shall begin by looking at some of the people in the Bible who found favor with God and men. We will be looking at who were among those who found favor with God and men, and how they found favor with God and men. And thirdly, what were the outcomes of their finding favor with God and men, and why they found favor. Let's start with Noah. In Genesis 6 verse 5 and verse 7, it says, Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. So the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beasts, creeping things and birds of the air. And verse 8 says, But Noah found grace or chen, favor in the eyes of the Lord. That means Noah and his immediate family, his wife, his sons, and his sons' wives will be saved from the flood that is coming upon the earth. That also means a certain number of living things of each kind, birds, animals, and creeping things, will also be preserved alive through an ark which Noah will build under God's instructions. In that way, the human race of all living things, the animals, will be preserved and start afresh after the flood. What were the reasons that Noah found favor with God? The Bible tells us that Noah was different from all the other people in his generations. In Genesis chapter 6 verse 9, it says that Noah was a just man, perfect or blameless, having integrity in his generations, and Noah walked with God. So these words give us the clue as to how we can find favor with God. Moreover, Noah believed what God said and obeyed, even though God gave him the tough assignment of building an ark. We have considered Noah. Now let's look at Joseph. Joseph was cruelly sold into slavery by his brothers and ended up in Egypt to serve under Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh. But Genesis 39, verse 2 to verse 4 say that the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all he did to prosper, or to be a success in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and served him. Then he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had he put under his authority, or in his hand. Then Joseph suffered another blow. He was falsely accused by Potiphar's wife and was put in prison. Genesis 39 verse 21 to 23 say, But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy, and he gave him favor, or caused him to be viewed with favor by or in the sight of the keeper of the prison. Verse 22, And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners who were in the prison. And the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. Then one day Joseph was taken out of prison to interpret Pharaoh's dreams. And when he did, Pharaoh promoted him to the highest position in Egypt, next only to himself. In Acts chapter 7, verse 9 to 10, Stephen, addressing his countrymen, said, "But God was with Joseph and delivered him out of all his troubles and gave him favor." The word there in Acts is charis or grace, and wisdom in the presence of Pharaoh, who made him governor over Egypt and all his house. Joseph had truly found favor with Potiphar, Pharaoh's officer, with the keeper of the prison, and with Pharaoh himself, the king of Egypt. In other words, he found favor with God and man. As a result, he was responsible for saving Egypt and Canaan from a very severe famine. So once again, we ask the question, what were the reasons that Joseph found favor in the sight of God and man? First, it is because he feared God. He fled from Potiphar's wife, who was trying to seduce him because he feared God. Secondly, he had a good attitude. In spite of adversities, he served diligently under Potiphar and the keeper of the prison. Thirdly, he had a forgiving heart. In spite of what his brothers did to him, he forgave them and he was kind to them. And fourthly, his faith and his trust was in God. In Genesis 45, verse 5, verse 7, and verse 8, Joseph said to his brothers, "God sent me before you to preserve life, to save your life by a great deliverance. So now it was not you who sent me here, but God." We have considered Noah and Joseph. We shall now look at Esther. In Esther chapter 2, verse 17, we read, "The king loved Esther more than all the other women, and she obtained grace, which is chen, favor. And favor, the word there is chesed, kindness, in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti." Ahasuerus, the king of Persia, was looking for a replacement for Queen Vashti, who was removed from her position because of her disobedience to the king. And out of so many women who were prepared for the king, Esther was chosen. As we read earlier, Esther 2:17 says that she obtained favor in his sight, in the sight of the king of Persia. Later on, when there was a plot by Haman, who was set by King Ahasuerus above all the princes, Haman's plot was to destroy all the Jews in the kingdom of Persia. Queen Esther was then advised or commanded by her older cousin Mordecai, who was also her guardian, to approach the king and to plead for the lives of the Jewish people. Esther 4:11 says, "All the king's servants know that any man or woman who goes into the inner court to the king, who has not been called, he has but one law: put all to death, except the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter." After her initial hesitation and the fast of the Jewish people in the royal city, Queen Esther approached the king. Esther chapter 5 verse 2 says, "When the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she found favor in his sight, and the king held out the golden scepter that was in his hand." You know the rest of the story, that in the end, Queen Esther pleaded before the king for the lives of the Jewish people who were in all the king's provinces. And as a result, they were saved from the plot of Haman and from annihilation. Queen Esther found favor with the king. So back to the question, what were the reasons that Queen Esther found favor with the king? First is because she was submissive and obedient, as seen in her submission and obedience to her guardian and cousin Mordecai. Mordecai was like a father to her. And second is because she trusted in God. She requested her people to fast and pray for 3 days to find favor with the king before she approached him. We have considered Noah, Joseph, and Esther, and now we shall consider Mary. We are told in Luke chapter 1, verse 26 to 28, that in the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, the angel Gabriel was sent by God to a city of Galilee named Nazareth to a virgin betrothed to a man whose name was Joseph of the house of David. The virgin's name was Mary. And having come in, the angel said to her, Rejoice, highly favored one. The word favored there is keritoth. It sounds like a connection with charis. The Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women. And in verse 30, the angel said to her, Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor, charis, or grace, with God. The announcement by the angel Gabriel to Mary was sudden and unexpected. The announcement included, in verse 31, God's plan that she will conceive and bring forth a son, Jesus. It was also separately revealed to Joseph in a dream that this son, Jesus, will save his people from their sins. This is recorded in Matthew 1:21. We are also familiar with the rest of the story, that all these came to pass, all these revelations came to pass. Mary's finding favor with God, resulting in the provision of salvation for all mankind. Coming back to the question again, why did Mary find favor with God? Or what was the reason that Mary found favor with God? First, it is because she was willing and submissive to do God's will, in spite of the price she had to pay. After the announcement by the angel Gabriel, Mary responded and said in Luke 1:38, Behold, the maidservant of the Lord, let it be to me according to your word. Secondly, because she trusted God and his plans. It was a very great responsibility for Mary to become the mother of Jesus, but she put all her trust in God. We have looked at some of the people in the Bible who found favor with God and man. Now we shall look at how we can find favor with God and man very briefly. Number one, in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 3 to 4, it says, Let not mercy and truth forsake you, and so find favor and high esteem in the sight of God and man. How can we find favor with God if He would not let mercy and truth forsake us? And secondly, in Proverbs chapter 8, verse 35, it says, For whoever finds me, or wisdom, the wisdom of God, the wisdom of God's word, finds life and obtains favor from the Lord. And the Hebrew word there is different word now. It is ratson, ratson, or goodwill. So we have looked at some of the people in the Bible who found favor with God and man, and how we can find favor with God and man. Now we shall look at who will find favor with God and man. In Psalm chapter 5, verse 12, it says, For you, O Lord, will bless the righteous. So I've underlined the righteous. The righteous are those who will find favor with God and man. And you will surround him. You will bless the righteous with favor. The word there is ratson, goodwill. You will surround him as with favor, you will surround him as with a shield. And secondly, in Proverbs 11, verse 27, in the Amplified translation, it says, He who diligently seeks good. So I've underlined that. Who will find favor with God and man? He who diligently seeks good and not evil. I did not put the word evil, but it's in the verse. That is the contrast. The contrast. If you diligently seeks good, you seek God's favor. But if you seek evil, then it will be otherwise. And thirdly, in Proverbs 12, verse 2, it says, A good man obtains favor from the Lord. It's a good man, the favor from the Lord, ratson. And the opposite is a man of wicked intention. Then it will be otherwise. So fourthly now, we shall look at the results of finding favor with God. Number one, in Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse 23, in blessing the tribe of Naphtali, Moses said, this is in the Amplified Translation, O Naphtali, satisfied with favor, again is ratzon, goodwill, satisfied with favor, and full of the blessing of the Lord, possess the Sea of Galilee and its warm sunny climate like the south. That means the man who finds favor with God, he is full of the blessing of the Lord. This is the result of finding favor with God. And secondly, in Psalm chapter 30, verse 7, in the Amplified Translation, it says, by your favor or ratzon, goodwill, O Lord, you have established me as a strong mountain. So it means that we will be established like a strong mountain when we find favor with God. And thirdly, in Isaiah chapter 60, verse 10, it says, in my favor, this is God speaking, in my favor, the favor is ratzon again, goodwill, I have had mercy on you. Probably referring to God showing mercy on the people of Israel. So we come to our conclusion today that we have looked at some of the people in the Bible who have found favor with God and man, people like Noah, Joseph, Esther, and Mary. Joseph and Esther was with God and man, and Noah and Mary was more of favor with God. We have also considered who are those who will find favor with God and man. In Noah's case, he was a just man, righteous man. He walked with God, and he believed and obeyed what God said. And in Joseph's case, we found that he feared God and stayed away from evil. He had a good attitude of spirit, and he served diligently in spite of adversities. He had a forgiving heart, and his faith and trust is in God. In Esther's case, she was submissive and obedient, and her faith and trust was also in God. And lastly, in Mary's case, she was willing and obedient, and she trusted God and his plans. From other scripture verses, we found that he who is a good man and who diligently seeks good will find favor with God. And lastly, the man who finds favor with God will be full of the blessing of the Lord. He will also be established like a strong mountain, and God will show him mercy. So may the grace of God be upon you. May the grace of God be upon you and enable you to be the man and the woman to whom God will grant his favor.